They were built in secret workshops, designed to rewrite the rules, and then buried before the public could even lay eyes on them. Too powerful, too strange, or just too risky for their time, these Chrysler cars were banned before they had a chance to make history. No showrooms, no commercials, no second chances, just silent prototypes and forgotten blueprints. Here are 12 banned cars Chrysler built but never released. And once you hear about them, you'll wonder why they were hidden away. The 1966 Dodge Charger Daytona 2 concept is one of those ghost stories of automotive history. A car that very nearly existed, yet was deemed too wild even by the wild standards of 1960s muscle car fever. Long before the public ever laid eyes on the production 1969 Charger Daytona with its unmistakable beak-like nose and skyscraping rear wing, Chrysler's designers and aerodynamicists were already deep in the wind tunnels, experimenting with something even stranger, even more radical. A machine that today survives only in dusty design sketches, whispered rumors, and a few grainy photos. Picture this: a Dodge Charger stretched to almost impossible proportions at the front. Its prow so sharp and extended, it looked like it could slice through the night air. The nose of the Daytona 2 concept wasn't merely long, it was aggressively, almost absurdly pointed. A spear of aluminum and steel that projected forward beyond any sense of practical length, trading real-world usability for pure aerodynamic ambition. The wing out back was lower, more integrated, a sculpted blade that balanced the visual aggression of the nose. In wind tunnel tests, it reportedly showed astonishing drag reduction and downforce figures, suggesting it could have redefined what a stock car could do on the superspeedways. Inside Chrysler's secret design studios, the Daytona 2 wasn't just about styling, it was about speed at any cost. Engineers and stylists had grown obsessed with the science of aerodynamics, inspired by what they'd seen on European race cars in aerospace engineering. The idea was simple but audacious. If you could cheat the wind enough, a big, heavy American muscle car could dance through the air at 200 miles per hour, outpacing smaller rivals and rewriting NASCAR's rulebook in the process. But even by the anything-goes standards of the 1960s, the Daytona 2 concept was too much. Executives, fearing public backlash or ridicule, worried it looked cartoonish, freakish, the sort of design that might terrify showroom customers rather than inspire them. Dealers raised eyebrows, quietly questioning who exactly would buy a family coupe that had the silhouette of a Le Mans prototype and a nose longer than the car's own wheelbase. And so, reluctantly, Dodge's brass ordered it to be toned down. The eventual production Daytona, launched in 1969, kept the idea of the nose, cone, and wing, but softened them. The nose was shorter and blunter, the wing taller and more functional, allowing the trunk to open. The result was still outrageous, but just inside the boundaries of what could actually be sold. And as for the Daytona 2 itself, it quietly disappeared, like so many prototypes of its time. Some accounts suggest the lone prototype was dismantled, its special panels scrapped or repurposed, its story left to fade from public memory. It never roared to life on track. It never cruised down Main Street, stunning onlookers into slack-jawed disbelief. Instead, it became one of those tantalizing what-ifs. A design so daring, it never got the chance to prove whether it would have soared or flopped. And yet, looking at what came after, the production Charger Daytona and its Plymouth sibling, the Superbird, it's hard not to wonder what might have been. Those cars became legends, symbols of a brief, beautiful moment when American automakers were willing to push past reason in search of speed. The Daytona 2 concept was the first step down that path, a vision unclouded by practicality or marketing departments, pure engineering arrogance cast in steel and fiberglass. Imagine pulling up in that thing today. A nose longer than most city cars, a stance that shouts speed even when parked, a shape that would make pedestrians stop mid-stride just to point and stare. It would be completely impractical, probably terrifying to maneuver through traffic, and so extreme it would barely fit in a standard parking space. But the sense of drama? Unmatched. Would you have dared to drive it? Would you have taken it out on Sunday mornings just to see the reflection of that impossibly long nose stretching away into the distance? Or would you have parked it carefully in a garage, knowing you owned not just a car, but a rolling piece of forbidden history, a car that by all logic shouldn't exist? In the end, the 1966 Dodge Charger Daytona 2 concept stands as a forgotten monument to a time when speed really did come before everything else, before practicality, before market surveys, before common sense. And though it never made it to the streets, its spirit, that raw aerodynamic madness, still echoes in every winged muscle car that followed. It was too radical to live, yet somehow too beautiful to completely vanish from memory. The 1970 Plymouth Barracuda Rapid Transit prototype wasn't just a show car. It was a rolling, rumbling act of rebellion, painted in metal flake and lacquer, born out of a brief moment when Detroit dared to throw caution, fuel economy, and federal regulations to the wind. Created for Chrysler's famous Rapid Transit System traveling show, this beast wasn't content to merely suggest speed. It practically roared it from every scoop, stripe, and side exit exhaust. With its aggressively chopped roofline, psychedelic custom paintwork that seemed alive under show lights, and an interior stripped to the essentials of go-fast madness, it wasn't built for the road, the track, or even the drag strip. It was built for crowds, to shock, awe, and leave burnouts in the minds of teenagers who'd swarm local dealerships begging for something even half this wild. In an era already bristling with high-compression big blocks and quarter-mile bragging rights, the Rapid Transit prototype took things further. Its low stance and shaven-down roofline made it look as though it had been designed by someone who'd lost patience with gravity. The side pipes spat fury rather than politely whispering exhaust, and the sheer attitude baked into every curve and weld turned what began as a factory CUDA into a defiant middle finger to caution and compromise. But the moment it was born was already the moment it started to die. The year was 1970, the same year insurance premiums spiked into the stratosphere for high-performance cars, and new federal safety and emissions regulations loomed like storm clouds over every engineering department in Detroit. Suddenly, the idea of building a car that advertised excess horsepower and street dominance wasn't just edgy marketing, it was an existential risk. Chrysler's leadership, once emboldened by the street racer mystique, began to see the Rapid Transit prototype not as a hero, but as a liability, a rolling embodiment of everything that the press, the public, and politicians were lining up to attack. So rather than becoming the next street legend, the Rapid Transit prototype quietly retreated to the show circuit, where it spent its short, glorious life mesmerizing car show crowds under bright spotlights, draped in the haze of cigarette smoke and rock music. Then, after its tour ended, it simply disappeared. Not destroyed, as so many concept cars were, but mothballed, hidden away like a secret Chrysler hoped everyone would forget once the muscle car era truly crashed into the brick wall of 1973's oil crisis and emissions controls. It's almost poetic, built to scream, then ordered to go silent. To look at it now is to see a time capsule of unapologetic, gasoline-soaked bravado. The chopped roof that defied headroom concerns, the custom bodywork that sneered at production cost, the paint that glittered under show lights but was far too outrageous for suburban streets, all speak to a moment when an American car could be art, rebellion, and marketing stunt all at once. What's haunting is the question that lingers: what if Chrysler hadn't blinked? What if they'd given dealers a limited run of these roof-chopped, race-inspired, side-piped monsters? Would they have sold out instantly and become the crown jewel of every collector's garage today? Or would they have brought the hammer of insurance companies and politicians down even faster, accelerating the death of the entire muscle car era? We'll never know, because the Rapid Transit prototype's wildest dreams stayed locked inside that one show car. So it sits, rarely seen except in grainy photographs and car show memories, as a ghost of a future that could have been. A future where the Barracuda didn't just look fast, but looked so aggressively, threateningly fast that even its own maker got nervous. It remains a strange contradiction. Built by the factory to prove how far they could go, then buried by the same factory out of fear they'd gone too far. And in that contradiction lies its legacy. Proof that sometimes the most radical designs aren't killed by competitors or lack of interest, but by the brand's own sudden terror of its own audacity. It was a car that scared everyone, even the people who built it. And somehow, that makes it even more legendary. The story of the 1955 Chrysler Falcon isn't just about a pretty car that never made it to showrooms. It's about how close Chrysler came to rewriting its own history, only to blink at the last second. Standing barely 3 feet high at the cowl and dripping with European elegance, the Falcon was Chrysler's daring gamble to challenge the Corvette and Thunderbird head-on. Yet instead of roaring into production, it became a beautiful ghost, haunting the halls of what might have been. Imagine the scene in 1955. America in full Technicolor optimism, tail fins reaching for the sky, rock and roll on the radio, and every major automaker dreaming up the next great sports car. Into this fever dream rolled the Falcon, a real, running V8-powered two-seater designed under the hand of Virgil Exner, the man who would soon lead Chrysler's entire forward-look revolution. The Falcon wasn't just a clay mock-up or a non-functional showpiece. It was built on a shortened chassis, wore hand-formed bodywork with delicate chrome accents, and hid Chrysler's new 276 cubic inch poly-head V8 under its swooping hood. It could drive, corner, and stop, and it did so in front of crowds who were stunned by how modern it looked compared to anything else from Detroit. Its lines were graceful but powerful. The low split grille hinted at speed. The exaggerated rear fenders balanced elegance with aggression. The wraparound windshield and minimal overhangs hinted at European coach builders' influence. Some called it Chrysler's answer to Ferrari, and they weren't wrong. The Falcon oozed the kind of transatlantic sophistication that could have reshaped Chrysler's image from a staid builder of family sedans into a true competitor on the sports car stage. Inside, the cockpit was as stylish as the body. Slim bucket seats, a simple but elegant dash, and a sense of intimacy that American cars rarely offered at the time. It invited you to drive, not just cruise. And beneath all that style lay engineering that could actually back it up. Independent front suspension, decent brakes for the era, and the V8 ready to growl when you pushed your foot down. So why didn't it happen? On paper, the Falcon made sense. Corvette sales were still low but growing, Thunderbird orders were about to explode, and Chrysler's image desperately needed youth and flair. But inside the boardroom, fear won out. Chrysler executives, wary of niche markets and worried about distracting resources from the profitable full-size sedan segment, decided a low-volume sports car was too risky. They saw the Corvette's early slow sales and the uncertain return on investment and chose caution. The Falcon, once heralded by its creators as the spearhead of a bold new Chrysler, was quietly canceled. Only a handful were ever built. Estimates range from 3 to 5, and each ended up in private hands or museums. Some were painted different colors, at least one was converted to left-hand drive. But they never saw dealer floors, advertisements, or the open road as part of Chrysler's official lineup. Instead, the Falcon became an instant collector's curiosity, a glimpse of what Chrysler could have been if it had dared to challenge the status quo. Its story is more than just missed opportunity, it's also about timing. Had the Falcon launched, it could have arrived right before the sports car boom of the late 50s and early 60s. It could have paved the way for Chrysler to build performance coupes and roadsters, to shape the pony car wars even before the Mustang. Instead, Chrysler spent the next decade chasing rather than leading, its muscle car glory years coming later with the Charger, Barracuda, and Challenger, none of which carried the pure two-seat spirit the Falcon embodied. Today, those few surviving Falcons are treated as rolling art, cherished by collectors not just for their rarity, but for what they represent. A fork in Chrysler's history, where bold design met corporate hesitation. Each curve and chrome strip speaks of ambition stopped short, of vision clipped by boardroom nerves. Was it too beautiful to risk sharing the road, or too disruptive to a company afraid of change? Maybe both. But that tension between daring design and corporate conservatism is what makes the Falcon unforgettable. It wasn't a failed car, it was an unbuilt legend, a car that proved that sometimes what you don't make becomes more iconic than what you do. In the end, the Falcon is a love letter to what might have been. An American sports car that could have stood proudly next to Europe's best, that had the power and the pedigree to succeed, and that still turns heads 70 years later. It asks us to imagine the alternate history, an American sports car that could have stood proudly next to Europe's best, that had the power and the pedigree to succeed, and that still turns heads 70 years later. It asks us to imagine the alternate history, a Chrysler unafraid to build beautiful, impractical, emotional cars, and what roads we might have seen them driving on. Sometimes the cars left behind tell the most hauntingly beautiful stories of all. Yet even as the Flightwing dazzled onlookers and Chrysler's own executives, reality hovered like an uninvited shadow at the edge of every design meeting. Underneath that swooping glass and knife-edged nose lay a truth impossible to ignore. The Flightwing wasn't just ahead of its time, it was almost outside of time, so advanced that the world it was born into had no place to put it. Consider those extraordinary power-operated gull-wing doors, effortlessly rising on electric motors to grant entry like the grand entrance to a futuristic temple. They were elegant, theatrical, and frighteningly delicate. Engineers worried about reliability. What would happen if a motor failed, leaving a door half open and pouring rain? What if the complex hinge system warped under real-world stress? In an era before modern crash standards, side impact beams, or even practical testing for rollover safety, these beautiful wings were a regulatory and engineering nightmare. The Flightwing didn't just bend the rules of design, it broke rules that hadn't even been written yet. Then there was the glass, acres of seamless, curved panels that made the car look as if it were carved from a single fluid gesture. But those graceful curves trapped heat like a greenhouse, turning the Flightwing's futuristic cabin into an oven on sunny days. Air conditioning was still a luxury feature back then, not a given. And the thin pillars that allowed for panoramic views offered little real protection in a crash. To Chrysler's dreamers, these were solvable problems. To the cautious accountants and legal teams, they were looming disasters. Even the very shape of the Flightwing, that impossibly low roofline, that tapering rear deck, was too radical. It didn't just look fast, it was fast, thanks to lightweight construction and Chrysler's powerful V8 under the hood. But the car sat so low that real-world concerns, speed bumps, steep driveways, sudden potholes, would quickly turn driving it into a daily balancing act. It might have felt like piloting a spacecraft, but on the cracked roads of 1960s America, it was a spacecraft forced to taxi on gravel. And then, beyond the physical limitations, came the cultural ones. In the dawn of the 60s, America was caught between old and new. The rocket-age optimism that launched the Flightwing's very design clashed with a creeping awareness of safety, practicality, and cost. Chrysler's own leaders, while captivated by the Flightwing's presence on a turntable, quietly questioned who exactly would buy such a car and how it would ever survive the punishing realities of production lines, warranty claims, and insurance regulations. Ultimately, what doomed the Flightwing wasn't that it failed to deliver on its promise, it was that it promised too much. It asked the world to leap ahead a decade, maybe two, in taste, safety standards, and technological readiness. The accountants saw a hand-built prototype that could never be mass-produced without bankrupting the company. The lawyers saw liability nightmares in every curve and hinge, and the marketers, despite their admiration, saw a car that would be too strange, too fragile, too expensive, and too limited to ever truly sell. So the Flightwing faded from public view. It never reached a dealership floor or roared down a suburban street on a Saturday night. It never had the chance to age, to break down, or to become an object of ridicule when fashion changed. Instead, it remained frozen in time, a single, impossibly sleek artifact of a moment when Chrysler dared to imagine a future that was stunningly beautiful, but simply too fragile to exist. And maybe that's why it still captures imaginations today. The Flightwing was banned not by a single law, but by the collective caution of reality itself, a reality that refused to let something so purely visionary, so defiantly impractical, roll off the assembly line. In the end, it became exactly what it looks like, a beautiful daydream caught halfway between what was possible and what could never be. The 1964 Plymouth XP61 turbine car stands as one of the most fascinating what-if chapters in automotive history, a bold experiment at the intersection of futuristic technology and traditional American car culture, wrapped in the jet-age optimism of the 1960s. At a time when tail fins and chrome ruled the roads, Chrysler dared to envision a family car that could literally be powered by a turbine engine, a propulsion system more commonly found on aircraft than on the highways of suburbia. This wasn't just a styling exercise or a fanciful concept. The XP61 was built with a working turbine power plant installed, making it one of the few real turbine-powered cars to ever roll out of an American automaker's research lab. The turbine engine, derived from gas turbine technology, was fundamentally different from the V8s and inline sixes familiar to most drivers. Instead of pistons firing in cylinders, this engine spun a turbine blade at incredibly high speeds, tens of thousands of revolutions per minute, producing a smooth and continuous flow with power. It promised a near-silent ride, free from the vibration and mechanical clatter of a traditional engine. Chrysler's engineers were captivated by the potential, a car that could run on various fuels, needed far fewer moving parts, and theoretically required less maintenance. The turbine was compact and lightweight relative to its output, allowing designers more freedom with car architecture. The XP61's sleek aerodynamic coupe design, with its low profile, clean lines, and space-age touches, reflected the radical thinking behind its powertrain. Inside, drivers experienced a completely new kind of acceleration. Instead of the familiar growl and backfire, there was an eerie turbine whine that rose steadily as the car gained speed, lending the sensation of piloting a spacecraft rather than a conventional automobile. But as thrilling as the turbine dream was, the harsh realities of practical automotive production quickly set in. First, the turbine engine produced massive heat. Its exhaust gases were hot enough to damage standard automotive components and even posed a safety risk to bystanders. The XP61 required specially engineered materials and heat shields, adding to complexity and cost. More troubling was the turbine's fuel consumption. At idle or low speeds, it guzzled gas far more voraciously than a piston engine, which made it inefficient for stop-and-go city driving, the very scenario most family cars faced daily. Environmental concerns also played a significant role in dooming the project. Even in the 1960s, emissions regulations were tightening, and the turbine's exhaust contained high levels of nitrogen oxides and unburned hydrocarbons. It failed the emissions tests that would have allowed it to be sold legally in the United States. Insurance companies, ever wary of unproven technologies, were reluctant to back a car whose engine technology was so unfamiliar and whose long-term durability was uncertain. Then came the financial hurdle. The exotic materials required to build turbine engines were expensive, many sourced overseas, incurring steep tariffs and import taxes. These costs pushed the estimated retail price of an XP61 far beyond the reach of typical Plymouth buyers, closer to the price range of Cadillacs. For a company positioned as a mainstream brand, this was a commercial no-go. Chrysler executives, pragmatic and wary of taking risks in a fiercely competitive market, shelved the project quietly. The few turbine cars that were built didn't just sit unused. They became a guarded secret within Chrysler's archives. To protect proprietary technology and prevent competitors from gaining insight, most prototypes were destroyed. Only a handful survived, carefully preserved in museums or private collections, serving as reminders of an audacious technological experiment that challenged the very definition of what a car could be. Looking back, the Plymouth XP61 turbine car embodies the tension between innovation and practicality. It was a car born from a genuine belief that turbine technology could revolutionize transportation, yet it also serves as a cautionary tale of how far ahead of its time it truly was. It asked Americans to imagine a future where jet-age powertrains replaced combustion engines, where cars hummed smoothly like airplanes instead of roaring like engines. But it also revealed the limits imposed by economics, safety, regulation, and consumer expectations. In a broader cultural sense, the XP61 symbolizes the optimistic spirit of the 1960s, a time when America dreamed big and believed technology could propel society into a shiny, gleaming future. It reminds us that even the most radical ideas sometimes falter, not because they lack merit, but because the world isn't quite ready for them. The XP61 didn't just fail, it vanished almost completely, leaving behind only traces of its audacity in automotive history books and in the imaginations of enthusiasts who wonder what might have been. Would the turbine have revolutionized personal transportation if allowed to thrive? Could Chrysler have turned the XP61 into a successful production car, sparking a new industry standard? We may never know, but one thing is certain. The 1964 Plymouth XP61 turbine car remains a shining, if fleeting, example of how ambition and invention can challenge convention, and how sometimes the future arrives just a little too soon. The 1970 Dodge Diamante stands as one of the most tantalizing what-ifs in automotive history, a car that dared to defy the conventions of its time with a design so sharp, so radically different that it looked like it had been plucked from the dream notebooks of Italian supercar designers rather than an American automaker. The Diamante's silhouette was a masterpiece of bold geometry, razor-edged panels carved into a low, aggressive stance that screamed performance and luxury in equal measure. It was Chrysler's bold attempt to merge American muscle with European finesse, envisioning a new class of sports coupe that could rival the likes of Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Maserati, not just in speed and handling, but in sheer, unfiltered style. From every angle, the Diamante was breathtaking. Its long, sloping hood gave way to sharply creased fenders that framed wide tires, hinting at power lurking beneath. The roofline was sleek and purposeful, tapering back into a fastback rear that promised aerodynamic efficiency and a fierce presence on the road. Its exotic proportions were unlike anything else in the American market, a radical departure from the more conservative and boxy designs dominating showrooms at the time. Crowds at auto shows were captivated by its audacity. The Diamante was a head-turner, a bold statement that American car makers could still innovate and inspire. But beneath that breathtaking exterior lay a cruel paradox. The Diamante was designed in an era when safety regulations were tightening fast. Federal crash standards were becoming more stringent, requiring automakers to engineer vehicles with reinforced structures, impact-absorbing crumple zones, and occupant protection systems that the Diamante simply did not have. Its lightweight, low-slung frame, perfect for agility and speed, was not built to withstand these new demands. The very design that made it a striking piece of automotive art was also its greatest liability in the eyes of regulators. Faced with the daunting prospect of re-engineering the entire car from the ground up, Chrysler's leadership made a pragmatic but heartbreaking decision. The cost to make the Diamante compliant with federal safety rules was astronomical, threatening to blow apart already tight budgets and delay product timelines. Unlike today's world where supercars often find a way onto the road despite regulations, in 1970, the financial and legal hurdles proved insurmountable. The Diamante project was quietly shelved, the prototype and its bold ideas relegated to the shadows of the company's archives. What makes the story of the 1970 Dodge Diamante especially poignant is that it was not a case of market rejection or engineering failure. The car itself was praised for its design and potential performance. It was the cold, hard realities of government regulations and corporate risk aversion that killed it. In a way, the Diamante became a symbol of an era when automotive innovation was increasingly hemmed in by rules and red tape, where visionary concepts were forced to bow to the necessity of safety and liability. Today, the 1970 Dodge Diamante is a ghostly reminder of a path not taken. Its clean, sharp lines and futuristic styling remain a fascinating glimpse of what American cars might have become if daring design had been allowed to flourish unimpeded. It challenges enthusiasts and historians to imagine a world where Chrysler went head-to-head with European exotic makers, not just on horsepower, but on artistry and engineering bravado. Would the Diamante have reshaped the muscle and sports car scene if it had been allowed to hit the streets? Could it have sparked a new generation of American supercars that combine beauty, speed, and sophistication in ways never seen before? Or was it destined to be a tragic victim of an industry caught between dreams and regulations, too far ahead of its time to survive? For car lovers, the Dodge Diamante remains a magnificent what-if, an unfinished symphony of design and ambition that echoes through the corridors of automotive history. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest masterpieces never get their moment in the sun, buried beneath the cold logic of safety laws and budget sheets. But its spirit lives on, inspiring future generations to dream bigger, design bolder, and remember that every car, no matter how fleeting its existence, has a story worth telling. The 1991 Chrysler 300 concept stands as one of the boldest, most fascinating what-could-have-been stories in American automotive history. A car that dared to push boundaries, challenge conventional engineering wisdom, and redefine what a muscle car or performance coupe could be, only to be quietly buried by the harsh realities of business and legal caution. At its core, the concept was astonishing. Chrysler took a mighty V10 engine, known for its raw, brutal power and thunderous roar, and combined it with a front-wheel drive layout, a pairing so unusual that it immediately turned heads and raised eyebrows among engineers, enthusiasts, and critics alike. In a world where muscle cars traditionally meant rear-wheel drive, big engines pushing power to the back wheels, the idea of a front-drive car with more than 400 horsepower was almost heretical. From an engineering perspective, the challenges were monumental. Delivering V10 power through the front wheels alone required rethinking traction, torque steer, suspension geometry, and handling dynamics. Chrysler's designers and engineers had to innovate in packaging the large engine, managing heat dissipation, and reinforcing drivetrain components to withstand the immense stresses. The concept promised blistering acceleration and a unique driving experience, a brutal muscle car with a twist. This was not merely a styling exercise, but a serious attempt to push the limits of front-drive performance and shake up the segment. However, despite the engineering breakthroughs, the concept quickly ran into walls of caution. Chrysler's management, especially the marketing and legal teams, grew increasingly wary of the risks involved. For one, the car was expected to compete with the Dodge Viper, Chrysler's flagship supercar at the time, and executives feared that the new front-wheel drive monster could cannibalize Viper sales or confuse the brand's messaging. More importantly, there was a genuine concern about safety and liability. A front-wheel drive car with that much torque could behave unpredictably, especially under aggressive driving or low traction conditions. Torque steer, the tendency for powerful front-wheel drive cars to pull hard to one side under acceleration, could be so severe as to pose a real danger to drivers and others on the road. The fear of accidents and lawsuits was a real business risk that no automaker could ignore. Legal teams warned that insurance companies would likely balk at covering such a car, and the potential for recalls, lawsuits, and brand damage was simply too high. At a time when automakers were already navigating tightening emissions rules, safety regulations, and a rapidly changing market landscape, the thought of unleashing a potentially uncontrollable high-horsepower front-drive coupe was a risk no executive wanted to take. So, despite the project's promise and the engineering marvel it represented, Chrysler quietly shelved the 300 concept. It was never put into production, never officially shown beyond a limited audience, and today it exists mostly as a footnote in automotive lore, a symbol of daring ambition cut short by caution. The 1991 Chrysler 300 concept asks us to imagine a fascinating alternate automotive history. What if Chrysler had gone all in? Could it have ushered in a new era where front-wheel drive muscle cars dominated, blending blistering power with a layout previously thought unsuitable for such performance? Would it have inspired competitors to rethink drivetrains and challenge the rear-drive hegemony? Or was it simply a wild experiment too far ahead of its time, doomed to remain a prototype because it was too dangerous, too complex, or just too much car for the early 1990s? For enthusiasts, the story resonates as a bittersweet reminder of the delicate balance between innovation and prudence. The 1991 Chrysler 300 concept was a beast shackled by fear. Fear of legal trouble, fear of insurance fallout, and fear of brand damage. Yet beneath that fear lay the heart of a revolution in the making, a car that dared to defy norms and reimagine performance in a way few others have tried. Its legend lives on, a ghostly symbol of what might have been, inspiring car lovers to dream bigger and remember that sometimes the most exciting ideas are the ones that never reach the open road. The 1967 Dodge Dior II stands as one of the most extraordinary and imaginative concept vehicles ever designed, a visionary leap into a future that was decades ahead of its time. Unlike any traditional pickup truck, the Dior II flaunted a radically unconventional design that redefined what a truck could look like. Its most remarkable feature was the cab-forward configuration, which essentially pushed the driver's cabin to the very front of the vehicle, creating a sleek, low-slung profile unlike anything seen on the roads in the 1960s. The pièce de résistance was its jaw-dropping front-loading door, a massive hatch that lifted upward like the lid of a washing machine, allowing entry from the front of the vehicle. This wasn't just a quirky stylistic choice, it was a bold statement, an attempt to rethink vehicle access entirely and create a futuristic experience for drivers and passengers alike. The Dior II's sculpted flowing lines and futuristic aerodynamic form made it an instant head-turner on the auto show circuit. Its design was a stunning blend of artistry and engineering, with smooth surfaces that seemed to melt into one another, hinting at speed and agility despite its pickup truck roots. At a time when most pickups were boxy, rugged, and utilitarian, the Dior II's curvaceous and almost spaceship-like appearance made it seem as though it had landed from another planet. Fans and critics alike were fascinated by its wild imagination and the promise it held for the future of automotive design. Yet, behind this spectacular exterior lay the crushing realities of manufacturing, safety regulations, and practicality that would ultimately doom the Dior II as a production vehicle. The front-loading door, while visually stunning and innovative, created insurmountable challenges. Federal safety standards required vehicles to provide adequate crash protection, especially around entry points. The Dior II's sweeping low front hatch simply could not meet those requirements without extensive, prohibitively expensive engineering changes. Moreover, the ergonomics of such a design presented significant issues. Climbing in and out through a front hatch was awkward, especially compared to traditional side doors, and would have been a deal-breaker for everyday usability. Beyond safety and ergonomics, the manufacturing costs and complexities associated with such a unique design were daunting. The Dior 2's non-traditional layout demanded bespoke components and production processes that didn't fit within Dodge's plans or budgets. The company's engineers and executives had to balance creativity with commercial viability, and in this case, the balance tipped decisively toward the practical realities of mass-market production. The concept was quietly shelved and never saw the light of day beyond the showroom floors and promotional events. However, while the full-scale Dior 2 never made it to the streets, its legacy was far from over. Thanks to Hot Wheels, the tiny die-cast miniature Dior 2 became one of the most iconic and beloved toys ever produced. For decades, kids and collectors alike have treasured it, not just as a toy, but as a symbol of boundless creativity and daring innovation in automotive design. The Hot Wheels version immortalized the Dior 2's striking looks, allowing its spirit to live on in playrooms and collections worldwide. Through those miniatures, the Dior 2 inspired countless enthusiasts to dream big, reminding everyone that sometimes the most exciting vehicles are those that never get built for the road, but instead burn brightly in imagination. The story of the Dodge Dior 2 perfectly illustrates the eternal conflict between groundbreaking design and real-world constraints. It raises thought-provoking questions. What if Dodge had been able to solve the engineering and safety challenges? Could the Dior 2 have sparked a new era in pickup truck styling, blending futuristic flair with practicality? Might it have changed the way we think about trucks entirely? Or was it always destined to be a dazzling, untouchable concept, a beautiful mirage on the horizon of automotive history? In the end, the Dior 2's significance is not just about what it was, but what it represented. A fearless, ambitious vision that dared to challenge convention and push boundaries. It reminds us that automotive innovation isn't always about what hits the showroom floor, but also about the ideas that captivate our imagination and inspire the future, even if they never become reality. The Dodge Dior 2 remains a shining example of how some of the most extraordinary creations don't just fail to make it to production, they become legends, forever banned from the road, but immortalized in the hearts of dreamers and collectors everywhere. The 1989 Chrysler Portofino stands as a magnificent testament to a fleeting moment in automotive history when bold vision and daring design converged only to be cut short by the harsh realities of regulation, corporate caution, and shifting market forces. Imagine a car that seamlessly blended the flamboyant spirit of Italian supercar design with the practical ambition of American luxury sedans. A four-door Grand Tourer that looked like it belonged on the cover of a futuristic sci-fi magazine rather than a typical dealership lot. Built on a stretched chassis borrowed from the Lamborghini Jalpa, a car already known for its exotic pedigree, the Portofino pushed boundaries with its sharp wedge shape, dramatic suicide doors that swung open with an elegance rarely seen outside concept cars, and a vast panoramic glass roof that flooded the cabin with natural light, inviting the outside world into what was intended to be a revolutionary driving experience. Every line and curve of the Portofino spoke of speed and sophistication, from its aggressive front fascia to the taut aerodynamic silhouette that promised both beauty and performance. Inside, the interior was a masterclass in Italian craftsmanship, luxurious materials, precise stitching, and ergonomically advanced controls that combined form and function. It was more than just a concept. It was Chrysler's attempt to challenge the status quo and announce to the world that American manufacturers could match the artistry and technical prowess of the Italians. Yet, for all its visual impact and engineering ambition, the Portofino's story is one of brilliant potential unfulfilled. At the time, automotive safety regulations were tightening aggressively. The The Portofino's innovative suicide doors, which added a theatrical flair and ease of access for passengers, became its Achilles heel. These doors presented significant challenges for crash safety, particularly in side impact protection. To meet regulatory standards, Chrysler would have had to completely redesign the door structure, add heavy reinforcements, and perhaps sacrifice the car's graceful lines and lightweight performance. The cost of these engineering changes was staggering, especially for a project that occupied a precarious niche between exotic supercars and luxury sedans. Compounding these technical hurdles were internal corporate dynamics at Chrysler. The late 1980s were a turbulent time for American automakers, facing fierce competition from imports, tightening fuel economy and emissions rules, and increasing pressure from shareholders to focus on profitability and market-friendly vehicles. The Portofino, with its expensive Italian chassis, hand-built details, and avant-garde design, simply didn't fit the corporate playbook. It was deemed too costly, too risky, and too niche for mass production. Instead of pushing ahead, Chrysler's leadership pulled the plug, consigning the Portofino to an exclusive existence as a show car, a dazzling jewel showcased at motor shows but never destined for real roads. Today, the lone surviving Chrysler Portofino remains a haunting symbol of what could have been, a glimpse of a future where American cars dared to dream on a truly global scale, borrowing from and competing with the best of Europe. Its influence is still felt, however, in subsequent Chrysler and Dodge designs, most notably the Dodge Intrepid, which took inspiration from the Portofino's aerodynamic shape and sleek profile. But beyond design cues, the Portofino raises enduring questions about the balance between innovation and regulation, passion and practicality. How many other groundbreaking projects have been similarly stifled by the combined forces of legal hurdles, cost overruns, and corporate conservatism? How many times have visionaries been forced to retreat because the market or the rulebook wasn't ready? The Portofino's fate reminds us that the road from concept to production is littered with promising ideas crushed beneath the weight of feasibility studies, safety tests, and profit margins. For car enthusiasts and dreamers, the Portofino is a bittersweet legend. It represents the triumph of creative ambition and design excellence, but also the fragility of those dreams in the face of reality. Would you have been willing to take a gamble on this wild marriage of Italian passion and American muscle, embracing its style and innovation despite the challenges? Or would you have accepted the hard truth that sometimes the most beautiful cars are simply too ahead of their time to survive? In any case, the 1989 Chrysler Portofino endures, not just as a rare and exotic showpiece, but as a poignant reminder of the tension that fuels automotive progress, between the desire to break new ground and the need to play by the rules. It asks us to imagine a world where that balance tipped just a little more toward creativity, and what incredible machines might have roamed our roads if it had. The 1963 Chrysler Turbine Gia convertible stands as one of the most fascinating and ambitious experiments in automotive history. An extraordinary marriage of cutting-edge technology, visionary design, and bold engineering that challenged every conventional notion of what a car could be in its era. This wasn't just a vehicle, it was a daring leap into the future, a glimpse of tomorrow's transportation powered by a technology borrowed from the skies rather than the roads, the gas turbine engine. At a time when piston engines ruled supreme, Chrysler dared to imagine a new paradigm, combining the artistry of Italian coach builder Gia's elegant styling with a jet-inspired power plant that promised unprecedented smoothness, reliability, and performance. This car was a masterpiece in both form and concept, an icon of possibility and innovation, destined to become a legendary what might have been. From the outside, the Chrysler Turbine Gia convertible was a vision of sleek sophistication. The flowing, sensual lines of the coach-built bodywork were timeless, effortlessly blending aerodynamic grace with bold, futuristic cues that set it apart from any other car on the road. Its open cockpit invited passengers to experience the thrill of speed and freedom, while the craftsmanship inside was exquisite, offering a luxurious environment that matched the revolutionary engine beneath the hood. But what truly set this car apart was its heart, the turbine engine. Unlike the conventional V8s or inline sixes of its day, this power plant spun at thousands of RPMs with almost no vibration or mechanical noise, delivering a smooth, almost hypnotic hum rather than the traditional roar. This unique soundscape gave the car an otherworldly personality, hinting at a future where driving was less about brute force and more about refined power and efficiency. Yet, as breathtaking as the Chrysler Turbine Gia convertible was, it was also a machine born of contradictions and compromise. The turbine engine, while groundbreaking, presented enormous challenges. It generated immense heat, which proved difficult to manage, especially in a convertible, where the open top exposed occupants to the scorching exhaust air that flowed close behind the car. Drivers had to be mindful of this, often feeling waves of warmth that bordered on discomfort. Moreover, the engine was notoriously thirsty and required exotic fuels, making it impractical for everyday use at a time when gas stations only stocked conventional gasoline. The complexity of the turbine's internals also made manufacturing and maintenance prohibitively expensive, a serious obstacle for any hope of mass market appeal. Add to that the growing concerns over emissions. Turbines of that era struggled to meet even the rudimentary environmental standards of the time, and it became clear this car was more a visionary art piece than a feasible product. Behind the scenes, Chrysler's engineers and executives faced a difficult decision. They had in their hands a car that pushed the envelope of automotive technology and design, but was fraught with practical issues that no amount of innovation could easily solve at that moment. Safety concerns around heat and exhaust, the prohibitive cost of producing a turbine engine at scale, and the looming tightening of emissions regulations all conspired to bury the project before it could reach dealerships or consumers. The convertible prototype was locked away in corporate archives, an enigmatic relic that represented both triumph and failure. Triumph in its unflinching pursuit of the future, failure in its inability to reconcile that future with the reality of the 1960s automotive market. The legacy of the 1963 Chrysler Turbine Gia convertible transcends its rarity or technological novelty. It remains a profound testament to what happens when imagination meets ambition but runs headlong into the boundaries of economics, safety, and practicality. It invites us to ponder, what if the world had embraced turbine power? How might driving have changed if smooth, jet-like engines became the norm rather than combustion pistons? The car embodies the eternal struggle between visionary innovation and the inertia of the status quo, a dance where bold ideas often perish not for lack of brilliance, but because the world isn't yet ready for them. Would you have taken the risk to own such a vehicle? To accept its quirks, to endure its fiery cockpit, and to celebrate its uniqueness despite its practicalities? Would you cherish the experience of piloting a piece of futuristic technology decades before it was time, reveling in the smooth power delivery and ethereal engine note that defied all expectations? Or would the harsh realities of heat, fuel consumption, and maintenance steer you back to the familiar comforts of conventional muscle cars? Ultimately, the Chrysler Turbine Gia convertible is a symbol of human creativity pushing the limits, an audacious vision cast in metal and fire. It asks us to remember that innovation is not a straight path, but a winding journey marked by breakthroughs and setbacks alike. Sometimes the most extraordinary machines become legends not because they dominated markets or changed the world overnight, but because they dared to exist at the very edges of possibility, forever inspiring those who dream of what lies beyond the horizon. The 1971 Plymouth Barracuda Yellow Jacket prototype stands as one of the most compelling what-could-have-beens in muscle car history. a vehicle that embodied everything enthusiasts loved about the golden age of American performance, yet was ultimately snuffed out before it could truly make its mark. This car was a bold, aggressive vision of muscle car evolution at a time when the muscle car scene was already facing its darkest days. The Yellow Jacket wasn't just another CUDA. It was a statement of intent, a potential revival for Plymouth's once proud muscle lineage that had captivated fans with its raw power and rebellious spirit. From the moment you laid eyes on the Yellow Jacket, you knew this wasn't a car for the faint of heart. Its paint shimmered in a fierce, almost radioactive yellow that screamed speed and danger. The deep-dish wheels added an extra layer of menace, filling the wheel arches with a muscular stance that suggested the car could rip through any road. Side pipes snarled like wild beasts, ready to unleash fury, while the ultra-low stance gave the car a predatory, almost animalistic posture. The Yellow Jacket was pure aggression wrapped in sheet metal, with design cues that teased a more extreme CUDA to come in 1972, a car that promised to push the muscle car envelope to its limits. But behind this show-stopping appearance lurked a harsh reality. The early 1970s were a time of sweeping changes in the automotive world, and none of them were kind to muscle cars. Insurance premiums for high-performance vehicles skyrocketed, driven by accidents and liability concerns, making it prohibitively expensive for the average buyer to own and insure such machines. Emission standards tightened, forcing manufacturers to either develop expensive new technologies or reduce engine output drastically. Fuel prices rose amid geopolitical tensions, and the public's appetite for gas-guzzling muscle cars waned in favor of more practical and economical vehicles. The muscle car era, which had burned so brightly just a few years before, was now flickering dangerously close to extinction. Plymouth executives and engineers were painfully aware of this shifting landscape. The Yellow Jacket, despite its ferocious potential and jaw-dropping aesthetics, was caught in a perfect storm of external pressures that made its production impossible. Insurance companies saw it as a liability, the federal government viewed it as a compliance nightmare, and the market simply wasn't big enough to justify the risk. With heavy hearts and pragmatic decisions, the Yellow Jacket was quietly shelved, its name whispered only among Chrysler insiders, its existence nearly erased from the public record. Today, the 1971 Plymouth Barracuda Yellow Jacket prototype exists almost like an automotive myth, a symbol of what might have been if timing, economics, and regulations had allowed a last hurrah for the muscle car. It challenges us to imagine a world where the muscle car fightback was real, where Plymouth's wild vision helped slow the industry's retreat from high-performance passion. Enthusiasts and collectors who glimpse the story of the Yellow Jacket can't help but wonder, could this car have saved the muscle car segment from rapid decline? Or was it merely a bright, fleeting flare before the long muscle car night? In many ways, the Yellow Jacket serves as a powerful reminder that even the most ferocious machines, with their growling engines and brutal power, are not immune to the forces beyond horsepower. Forces like legislation, insurance risk assessments, and changing cultural values. It asks tough questions. Would you have risked driving such a raw, unfiltered muscle car at a time when the world was turning its back on this type of performance? Could such a car have found a place in the increasingly cautious automotive marketplace? Or was its very existence a doomed rebellion against inevitable change? For fans of muscle cars, the Yellow Jacket is a bittersweet legend, an emblem of passion curtailed too soon. It embodies the clash between unbridled automotive ambition and the harsh realities of the early 1970s, a period when muscle cars were forced into retreat by regulations, economics, and social shifts. And yet, even decades later, it still ignites imagination and desire, proof that sometimes the wildest dreams don't die quietly. They echo on, challenging us to remember what was lost and what might still be possible if the right spark ever returned. The 2004 Chrysler ME412 remains one of the most tantalizing what-if stories in modern automotive history. A jaw-dropping mid-engine supercar that promised to challenge the very best from Europe's elite hypercar makers, yet was crushed under the weight of corporate caution and market fears before it could truly roar to life on the streets. Powered by a quad-turbocharged Mercedes-Benz V12 engine, producing an astonishing 850-plus horsepower, this beast was designed to accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 3 seconds, making it one of the fastest and most powerful American cars ever conceived. At a time when supercars were dominated by Italian and German brands, Chrysler dared to dream big, aiming to take on legends like Bugatti, Ferrari, and Lamborghini head-on. The ME412 wasn't just a design exercise, it was a serious engineering feat. The chassis was crafted from lightweight carbon fiber, the aerodynamics carefully honed in wind tunnels, and the quad-turbo V12 was an absolute monster, delivering power with savage precision. Its name came from the engine's 4 turbochargers and 12 cylinders, a badge of raw technological ambition that screamed performance and exclusivity. When the ME412 was unveiled, it instantly wowed the automotive press and car enthusiasts worldwide. The sleek, aggressive styling combined exotic supercar looks with uniquely American muscle, embodying a bold statement that Chrysler was back and ready to play in the highest echelon of performance. Journalists raved about its blistering speed, razor-sharp handling, and futuristic cockpit, a place where driver and machine melded into a singular force of nature. The car wasn't just fast, it was a statement of intent, a promise that American automakers could once again produce a hypercar that rivaled the best in the world. Yet beneath all the excitement lurked a harsh reality. Despite the car's groundbreaking potential, Chrysler's executives grew increasingly wary. Production costs were astronomical, and the financial risks of launching such a specialized supercar in a still recovering automotive market were daunting. Legal departments fretted over liability and safety concerns. What if the car's blistering performance led to accidents? Could Chrysler afford lawsuits and recalls on such a niche vehicle? Furthermore, the brand's image was complicated. Chrysler wasn't known for ultra-luxury or hypercars. How would the public and loyal customers respond to this sudden leap into hypercar territory? The risk, it seemed, was too great. Almost overnight, the project was shelved. The ME412 prototypes, sleek, powerful, and fully functional, were quietly locked away, never to reach dealerships or customers. The dream of an American Bugatti killer was buried beneath layers of corporate fear, market uncertainty, and risk aversion. The car became a ghost in Chrysler's history, a legend whispered about by enthusiasts, but never fully realized. Looking back, the ME412 raises powerful questions about ambition versus caution in the automotive industry. Could Chrysler have rewritten the rules, carving out a place at the top of the supercar world? Or was the timing just wrong, the market too unforgiving, and the risks too high for an American car to truly take that leap? Would the ME412 have ignited a new supercar rivalry that pushed global automakers to even greater heights? Or was it destined to remain a beautiful, blazing what-if, an unrealized dream of speed and power? For fans of hypercars and American muscle alike, the ME412 symbolizes both the pinnacle of engineering bravery and the crushing reality of business caution. It is a reminder that sometimes the fiercest engines and boldest designs aren't enough to overcome the invisible forces of economics, legality, and brand identity. And yet, even in its absence, the ME412 continues to inspire. It challenges us to imagine an America that dared to build a supercar without compromise, a car that could have joined the ranks of the world's fastest and most revered machines. In a world obsessed with speed and power, the ME412 remains a tantalizing ghost, proof that sometimes fear can bury greatness before it can even get a chance to shine.